the Chief Vigilance Officer, the Chief Justice of India, the Chief Information Commissioner, the Lokayukta, media, rights activists, all are quick to pass judgment without an understanding of ground reality or constraints. I once had a human rights complaint filed on me because an official discussion carried on until 2 p.m. 2 p.m. in the afternoon, though lunch hour begins at 1:30 p.m. And if you realize the way we work in India, we don't keep, our hours are very fluid. It does not work like Europe or the USA. Our hours are very fluid. We work through the day. But there was a complaint filed against me. The complexity of administration and public policy making in a country like India is subject to so many pulls and pressures that it often takes an officer 3 to 6 months to get on top of not merely the various issues that are at stake, quasi-legal, quasi-illegal, legal, completely illegal, but also the different individuals who can destroy the effectiveness of a policy on the ground. Not only do the actors described keep changing their garb, they also use institutions like the media and judiciary to achieve their own vested interests or those of whom they serve. All these which I had narrated are areas where the IAS and governance itself can be improved. But for me, the most critical aspect is our selection and training. The IAS relies largely on situational management. I recall my first day at work, that was in September in 1988. I entered my remote subdivision of Savanur in Dharwad district, and I was tasked with chairing an irrigation committee meeting. Now, what is this animal called the irrigation committee? An irrigation committee is meant to ensure equitable distribution of water. It's technically a very simple issue. But when I reached the dam site, after an hour's journey, I found a riot situation. The head enders, do you know what a head ender is? Water flows in an undulating terrain from the top to the bottom. So the farmers who have their fields at the top, they are the head enders. Water comes there first. Those who are at the bottom are the tail enders. Water flows down to them. The head enders and the tail enders were about to come to blows. And what was the problem? Irrigation water is supplied to fields through canals. Though technically the understanding is that the water will be equitably distributed through the canal network, due to undulations of land and the force of gravity, the head enders who are at the top of the slope stand to benefit vis-a-vis the tail enders who are at the bottom of the slope. So regulation is necessary, and that is where I came in. This is what had caused the riot situation. Now, I was young, in my 20s at that time, unprepared, with minimal fluency in the local language Kannada. Right? I had to think quickly on my feet. I got up on a makeshift dais. It was actually a box, and I got on top of the box. And using only my voice, and in those days I had a louder voice than I do now. Never needed a mic for a very long time. Using only my voice, I quelled the crowd. I assured them of a rational and just solution, and they calmed down. We held a meeting in a consultative and peaceful atmosphere. Let me narrate another instance where a consultative and empathetic attitude helped me. For an outsider, government appears hierarchical. But in my world, the back and forth of dialogue, discussion and consultation, of give and take, often works better than authority. Many years ago, I worked in a power transmission company. I found that our core activity, that is transmission of electricity, had been outsourced. It was not being done by our own engineers, it was being done by contractors to whom we had contracted it out. Our substations were run by contractors who employed temporary engineers, usually diploma holders, not full engineers, diploma holders in engineering. Why? Because I spoke to you of the 1991 balance of payments and the World Bank and the IMF coming in. World Bank and IMF said government should downsize and right size. They stopped us from recruiting for many, many years. So the neoliberal efforts to make this public sector lean and mean constrained us from replacing the natural attrition of retiring engineers with fresh recruitment. I was then fresh from IIM Bangalore. So I convinced the political executive that our core activity, that is transmission, should be performed by our own personnel and we needed fresh, regular recruits. But I faced resistance from an unexpected quarter. Hundreds of these temporary engineers who had been employed by the subcontracting agencies, they were egged on by the powerful contractors' lobby and they sat in dharana in front of the Chief Minister's residence. The Chief Minister is the political executive head of the state, the federal state. The situation was volatile and my boss sent me there to tackle the situation. Now he sent me there not because he had any great faith in my ability, but because he held me responsible for this wacky idea that the core activity should be done by our own personnel. And so he secretly hoped that I would get ticked off by the Chief Minister or even better get bashed up by the protesting youth. I had to literally think of a solution in the 2-kilometer distance between my office and the Chief Minister's residence. And I did. Before I met the CM, I sat outside his house with the protesting youth. I asked them whether they would cooperate and participate in the recruitment. They thought a little, but pointed out that some of them or many of them had diplomas, not degrees. So in the context of India, unlike Germany, a degree has a very high value in comparison to a diploma, which is something you with your emphasis on skilling, the context is a little different here. So we thought, sitting there together with them, we thought whether recruitment at different levels was possible and whether a certain weightage could be given to the service which they had already rendered. We together then went, the protesters and me, the cause for all the protest, we together went and met the Chief Minister, and by the time we did, we had a rudimentary plan on which there was a broad consensus. Discussion and give and take had brought us closer to a solution. I didn't get bashed up. The only person disappointed was my boss. It was a win-win for everyone else. So, my point is that selection and training prepare you for leadership situations like these, where you are alone and you are managing a crisis. But governance is becoming horizontal. The Panchayati Raj system, as I spoke to you earlier, it has brought in a decentralized system of governance in rural India. New sectors like infrastructure bring in sophisticated management and financing methodologies like public-private partnerships, which require us to work in a network, not in a vertical. So, a consultative, collaborative attitude, a learning aptitude should be ingrained in our training and incorporated in our selection process as well. This will enable the IAS and government in general to function more in tune with the times. another incident. Some time ago, a few years ago, we were witness to a massive tragedy in India. The horrifying, highly avoidable deaths of the children of Muzaffarpur were a national shame. This happened a few years ago, you people will remember. Amidst all the finger pointing and blame throwing, some medical practitioners observed that after prolonged fasting, malnourished children slipped into hypoglycemia in the morning. And this was after they had eaten lychee. Lychee is a fruit in India. Very sweet on the inside, very coarse on the outside with a very coarse skin. Now, had they not eaten lychee, the glucose levels would have been maintained and the children would have come to no harm. The tragedy was that a whole group of children in a village suddenly died overnight. We were not able to save them. The children had consumed lychees on an empty stomach. Glucogenesis was blocked and brain functions were affected. The disease could have been prevented if the children are generally well nourished, but that was not possible in the immediate term. But as an immediate response, it could have been prevented by ensuring that the children ate a meal at night or by infusing 10% glucose within 4 hours of onset of brain dysfunction. All that was needed was to advise families to provide a cooked meal to children before going to sleep at night, or infuse all ill children with 10% glucose within 4 hours of the onset of brain dysfunction in the local hospital. Recovery would have been fast and complete. All that was needed was medical and societal agility. What does this illustration tell us? Governance has two aspects, the systemic and the responsive. In its systemic function, government enacts laws, sets up institutions, frames policy. It routinizes its processes and procedures and it aims for stability. But governments also have a responsive function, managing disasters, addressing grievances, controlling an epidemic. These require responsiveness, not systemic reform. Traditionally, governments all across the world have emphasized their systemic rather than their responsive role. In fact, even where responsiveness is called for, if there is a slip-up, governments have tried to systematize even more. For example, even in Muzaffarpur, where the children died, the public announcements were more about more hospitals, more surveillance measures, but actually what was needed was the simple, the immediate, the doable. It is not that governments are unresponsive, not at all, not in India. Our political system hinges on responsiveness. But in practice, the responsiveness functions are relegated to individuals. Many years ago, a couple of decades ago, there was a plague in a city called Surat. Plague after many years of human history. And the district collector was tasked with the responsibility of handling that plague. So that is one example, where the entire responsibility was put on that individual. He did it well and we controlled it, but that is one example. The politician who keeps in daily touch with his constituency. The policeman who runs and chases and catches a thief. All these personify responsiveness, but we need to do more. What we need to do is to institutionalize responsiveness. What we need to do is to sensitize and train our bureaucracy and our citizenry to be responsible. We need standard protocols for immediate action in case of calamities, epidemics, forecasting and so on. The government and the public, like business, needs to be agile. This is something which we need to do. keeps us going. Despite all the odds, and I have taken you through this meandering path, this creaking, lumbering machine of Indian public policy continues to work. How does that happen? The IAS affords the power to do great good, and quite often, if not always, be remembered for it. Many, most significantly Jawaharlal Nehru, our first Prime Minister, have commented on the unconditional love of the people of India. It sounds corny when you say it in words, but it is a feeling that you can hardly describe. Let me tell you one more story. In 2013, I was managing director of Kaveri Handicrafts. Please take them to Kaveri Handicrafts. It's one of the nicest places they can visit. Kaveri Handicrafts is our handicrafts corporation run by the government. And as managing director, I toured Bidar district, which is a far-flung district of Karnataka. And I visited an NGO which produced, an NGO is a non-governmental or voluntary organization, and this one produced sandalwood products. Normally when I visit a unit, I am received well.